On February 3rd, 2026, something unprecedented happened. China didn't fire a missile. Russia didn't invade anyone. No bombs, no tanks. But America just lost a war most people don't even know was being fought. And the weapon? Your wallet. Because right now, in boardrooms from Beijing to Riyadh, the people who used to need dollars don't anymore. And by the time most people realize what's happening, it'll be too late. Now look, while the mainstream media's got you distracted with political theater and culture wars, the real story is happening in central bank basements and SWIFT server rooms. Let's be real for a second. The dollar's dominance wasn't magic. It was a deal, a global agreement. You want oil? You use dollars. You want to trade internationally? Dollars. You want your country to survive economically? You better hold dollars. But that deal, it's breaking, and it's not breaking slowly. It's collapsing in real time, because in the last 90 days alone, 6 major economies have either bypassed the dollar entirely or announced they're preparing to. This isn't theory, this is policy. And what's terrifying is that most Americans have no idea this is even happening. December 2025, Saudi Arabia. For 50 years, the Saudis had an ironclad agreement with the US, sell oil in dollars, and will protect you. It was the foundation of dollar dominance, the reason every central bank on earth had to stockpile greenbacks. But on December 11th, that agreement quietly expired, and instead of renewing it, the Saudis started accepting yuan, Chinese currency, for oil. Now you might think, okay, so what? One country. Wrong. Within 3 weeks, the UAE followed, then Kuwait, then Indonesia. Believe it or not, we're watching the petrodollar system, the single biggest pillar of American financial power, collapse in real time. And here's the kicker. The Fed can't stop it. The Pentagon can't bomb it. And Congress? They're not even talking about it. But here's what makes this even more dangerous. The petrodollar wasn't just about oil, it was about leverage. Every country that bought oil needed dollars first. That meant they had to export goods to America, accumulate dollars, and then use those dollars to buy energy. It created artificial demand for US currency that had nothing to do with the strength of the American economy. It was a closed loop, a money printer that ran on everyone else's dependency. And now that loop is broken, Saudi Arabia isn't just accepting yuan because they like China. They're doing it because China's their biggest customer. They buy more Saudi oil than anyone else. And China doesn't want to use dollars anymore. They want to use their own currency. So the Saudis had a choice, lose their biggest customer or ditch the dollar. They chose survival. And it's not just oil. Let's talk about what happened in January 2026. Brazil and China, 2 of the largest economies on the planet, officially launched a bilateral trade system that completely cuts out the dollar. We're talking about hundreds of billions in trade, soybeans, machinery, electronics, all of it settled in yuan and reais. No dollars, no New York clearinghouses, no Federal Reserve oversight. This is a direct shot across the bow. Because Brazil isn't some rogue state. It's the largest economy in South America. It's a member of the G20. And it just said, we don't need you anymore. Now, imagine that happening with 10 more countries, 20, 50. What happens to demand for the dollar then? But that's not even the craziest part. Because while the petrodollar was dying, something else was being built. It's called mBridge. And if you haven't heard of it, you're not supposed to. It's a cross-border payment system. Think of it like SWIFT, the network that moves money between countries, except it doesn't use dollars. And it doesn't go through New York, it goes through Beijing. The system was launched in pilot form in 2023, but in October 2025, it went live for full commercial use. And the founding members, China, the UAE, Thailand, Saudi Arabia, and Hong Kong, with over 30 observer nations waiting in the wings. Now, here's why this matters to you. Every time a country uses mBridge instead of SWIFT, that's one less reason to hold dollars, one less treasury bond purchased, one less anchor keeping US interest rates low. And when fewer countries need dollars, the Fed has to print more just to keep the lights on, which means your rent, your groceries, your gas, all of it gets more expensive. You're not just watching geopolitics, you're watching your purchasing power get auctioned off to the highest bidder. Let's be real for a second. This isn't a conspiracy. It's a business decision. And right now, America's losing customers. Because here's the thing most people don't understand. The dollar's value isn't based on gold anymore. It's not backed by anything tangible. It's backed by trust. Trust that other countries will keep using it. Trust that the US economy is stable. Trust that we won't weaponize it, but we did weaponize it. And now that trust is gone. In 2022, when Russia invaded Ukraine, the US and Europe froze over $300 billion of Russian foreign reserves. Money that Russia had stored in dollars and euros just gone, seized. Now, whether you think that was justified or not isn't the point. The point is that every other country on earth saw what happened and thought, that could be us. If we piss off Washington, they could freeze our money too. So what did they do? They started diversifying. Russia dumped almost all of its US Treasury holdings. China reduced theirs by over $300 billion in the last 3 years. Even allies like Japan and South Korea have quietly been trimming their dollar reserves. And where's that money going? Gold, yuan, euros, anything but dollars. And here's where it gets really dangerous. Because the US doesn't just use the dollar for trade. It uses it as a weapon. Don't like a country's politics? Cut them off from SWIFT. Freeze their dollar reserves. Starve their economy. It's worked for decades. But now there's an alternative. And the countries we've sanctioned, they've been building it. Russia's been kicked off SWIFT since 2022. What did they do? Turn to yuan, gold, and barter trade. They're selling oil to India and getting paid in rupees, which they then use to buy Indian goods. No dollars involved. Iran? Same thing. Selling oil to China in renminbi. Even India, a US ally, is now trading with Russia using rupees and rubles. This is the hostage equation. We used to hold the world hostage with the dollar. Now, the world's holding us hostage without it. Because here's the thing. The US is $36 trillion in debt. We print money to pay for it. And the only reason we can get away with that is because everyone else needs dollars. But if they don't need dollars anymore, who's buying our debt? The Fed, printing more, which means more inflation, which means you pay the bill, and it's already starting. In late 2025, the US Treasury held multiple bond auctions that saw weaker than expected demand. Foreign buyers, the ones who usually gobble up US debt, didn't show up. So the Federal Reserve had to step in and buy the bonds themselves, which means they printed money to buy government debt. That's the definition of monetizing the deficit. And it's the same thing that collapsed currencies in Venezuela, Zimbabwe, and Weimar Germany. Now, I'm not saying we're turning into Zimbabwe tomorrow, but I am saying the mechanics are identical. Print money to cover debt. Inflation rises. Currency weakens. Repeat. And the only reason it hasn't spiraled out of control yet is because the dollar's still the reserve currency. But what happens when it's not? What happens when half the world is trading in yuan and the other half is using mBridge and nobody needs to hold dollars anymore? The value craters. And everything priced in dollars, which is everything you buy, gets more expensive. Your salary stays the same, but your cost of living doubles. Let's talk about what this looks like in practical terms. Imagine you're a European company that imports electronics from China. Right now, you'd convert euros to dollars, send those dollars to China, and China converts them to yuan. 3 currencies, multiple fees, exchange rate risk. But with mBridge, you just send euros directly, and it's converted to yuan instantly using a digital ledger. No dollars, no middleman, lower fees, faster settlement. It's just better. So why would anyone keep using the old system? They wouldn't. And they aren't. In January 2026, the Bank for International Settlements reported that mBridge processed over $22 billion in transactions in its first 90 days of commercial operation. That's not a test, that's real money moving outside the dollar system. And believe it or not, this was always going to happen, because the dollar's dominance was never permanent. It was a post-World War II artifact. The US had half the world's gold, the only intact industrial base, and everyone else was rebuilding. So the dollar became the default. But that was 80 years ago. China's economy is now comparable in size to the US. India's growing faster than almost anyone. The EU, for all its problems, is still a massive economic bloc. The world isn't unipolar anymore, and the financial system is finally catching up to that reality. But here's what's really wild. This isn't just about economics. It's about control. Because when you control the currency, you control the system. And for the last 50 years, the US controlled the system. We decided who got access to capital. We decided who got sanctioned. We decided the rules. But now, we're losing that control. And we're losing it fast. In the last 6 months alone, we've seen France complete a liquefied natural gas deal with China settled in yuan. We've seen Brazil and Argentina discuss launching a common South American currency. We've seen ASEAN nations, that's Southeast Asia, pilot a regional payment system to reduce dollar dependence. This is a global movement, and it's accelerating. Now, some people will say, but the dollar's been declared dead before, and it's always survived. And that's true. In the 1970s, people thought the end of the gold standard would kill it. In the 2000s, people thought the euro would replace it. Didn't happen. But here's the difference. Those were predictions. This is policy. Countries aren't speculating about moving away from the dollar. They're actively doing it. They've built the infrastructure. They've signed the agreements. They've moved the money. This isn't a maybe. It's a process that's already in motion. And the scariest part? Most people won't realize it until it's too late. Until they go to the grocery store and eggs are $12 a dozen. Until they try to retire and their savings have half the purchasing power they expected. Until they look around and realize that America, the country that's been economically untouchable for generations, is now just another player in a multipolar world, and not even the most important one. So here's where we are. The petrodollar is dead. mBridge is live. BRICS nations are expanding. Sanctions are losing their bite. Treasury auctions are struggling. And the Fed's only answer is to print more money, which makes everything worse. This is the endgame of American financial dominance, not a sudden crash, but a slow, grinding irrelevance. And the people who'll suffer the most? Regular Americans who had nothing to do with any of this, who were just trying to live their lives, but who'll wake up one day in a country that can't afford to be the empire it used to be. Now, look, I'm not saying the dollar's disappearing tomorrow, but I am saying the rules of the game just changed, and most people won't realize it until their 401k's cut in half or their grocery bill doubles again. If you want to stay ahead of this, I've put together a breakdown in the description, including what assets are actually gaining ground while the dollar loses it. Otherwise, just keep a close eye on the next BRICS summit in April, because what gets announced there could rewrite the next decade. The empire didn't fall with a bang. It fell when nobody needed it anymore.